Hello, everyone. My name is Bason. I'm the CEO of the Danish Design Center, and I'm here to introduce and also to moderate and contribute to this session, which we call digitizing public service delivery. So really the question is how to not put technology first, but people first, and how to think about the core principles and approaches to digitizing government in ways that connect with citizens. And I would say that that's a big question about value and value creation of digital government. You can say that the big question to ask as someone involved in public digitization is what change in the world are we aiming for? What change in people's lives? I'm quite aware that there are multiple types of value that we want to create in the public sector. I believe very strongly that one of the big ones is really to provide a great service experience for people as they interact with government in all kinds of areas, from education to social services, to care, to healthcare, and so on. So the service experience is one key kind of value. Another kind of value is obviously productivity. We want to use digital to be able to deliver more efficient, lower cost services because we're spending taxpayer money. But there's also the question of outcomes, which is, are we actually changing something for the better in people's lives through digitization? So are we influencing behavior positively? Are we getting higher compliance? Are we helping people get the job done that they need to get done with government? And finally, and fourthly, there's a question of democracy, which is about how digital can enable participation. How can digital solutions also be built in a way that's trustworthy, that's legitimate? How can we ensure privacy and safety? And these are the kinds of questions that are key, I believe, when we talk about innovation in the public sector and how digital can contribute, but also maybe where some of the pitfalls are. I'll just conclude with a few words on what has this got to do with design, and we'll probably get into it later on as well. But to me, design is very much about taking a human-centered approach to innovation and change, and that's particularly needed when we have an area full of technology. It's about understanding the human problem and human behavior at heart, and what the human experience we want to influence. It's about co-creation and co-designing together with many stakeholders, including users, as we endeavor to build new ideas and concepts of what we could create. And finally, designing is very much about experimentation. So prototyping, trial and error, testing out, rehearsing the future, so to speak, to ensure that we understand the effect our solutions will have on users, and ensure that we actually do get the outcomes and the value that we're aiming for. So that was just by way of introduction, a bit of a framing of at least some of the perspectives on this. And then now I'll invite the next panelist, Mr. Siim Sikkut, Estonian CIO, to also share his perspective and background on this topic. Over to you, Siim.
Thank you, Christian, and hi to everyone. So as a government CIO, then my role and the role of our office here is to steer how our government makes the most of digital technologies. We, as Estonia, as a government, as a country, we have been on this path for the last 25 or so years. And it has been actually a big part of our development story and journey for the last 25 years as well. We've reached the point where literally everything you need to do with the government, almost everything, you can do digitally yourself online wherever you are in the world. So, the only exception today is getting married. So you still have to show up for that, sorry to say. But and we've reached a point where today, as the Estonian government, we have opened our services for the whole wide world to use. So, for example, you can become virtual Estonian by becoming an e-resident of Estonia, set up a company here, run it from a distance, do everything digitally yourself. Now, this has been quite a journey in a sense that we started really with one big value in mind. If I borrow the framework that Christian introduced, we were very focused for a long, long time on productivity. Basically, going digital was the way for our government to be a fully fledged government and for the country to be, full country with welfare, defense, I mean, the whole spiel. And at the same time, not have high taxes. So that was a way for our small country, we are 1.3 million people, to basically pull off the challenge of punching beyond our weight. But in the last 5 years, we have now started to make a transition and really brought the emphasis on exactly the service quality, the service experience, just like Christian highlighted, to the focus. Even all the way that we are now proposing that for the next strategy, next digital government strategy, the ultimate goal should be exactly the best possible service experience for the user. Whether they are residents of Estonia, e-residents, doesn't matter, but basically whoever is the user gets things done in the most efficient and best possible way, the easiest way with the government. Now, we can go into details about that, but this sort of shift has been quite a trick, and exactly it's been a shift in mindset. It's been something we still are in the middle of. We are nowhere near done, and especially as technology moves forward. So I'm quite keen that and passionate that technological advantages themselves actually allow us to become more human-centered and deliver a better experience as well. Be them just how we've switched to mobile in the last 10 years, or be them what AI can bring in the next stage. So I'll stop here just to say that yes, it's a topic that is very dear to our heart, and I see it is a fundamental shift in the governments who have been on digital path for longer periods of time.
Thank you very much, Siim, and I also look forward to reflecting a bit on the Estonian experience seen from a Danish vantage point, because this productivity and efficiency focus has also been extremely prevalent in this country until recently. So now we're shifting to Lithuania, to Ms. Arune Matelyte, who is manager of the GovTech Lab within the government there. I look very much forward to hearing your perspective on this, and please introduce yourself as well.
Hi, Kristen. Hi, Siim. Very nice to be here. And as it was mentioned, I'm the manager of the GovTech Lab in Lithuania. And the GovTech Lab actually was created very recently here at the end of last year to kind of aim and break down that assumption that public sector has the monopoly of knowledge around both the challenges that it has, but also in the technological capacity to build them. So as we're talking about the underlying values behind that, the co-creation and that opening up of the public sector has been the main focus of us. And actually, it came about to be when me and a few of my colleagues were working on different digital projects in the public sector, and we saw that there is that focus, and there are people working on the overall kind of digital transformation and so on, but there's still a lack of that kind of a bit of a disruptive force in the government to kind of push it forward. So not like we have teams that work on overall digital transformation, but how can we kind of push the boundaries? How we can encourage even more experimentation? So with that in mind, we kind of created the GovTech Lab, a team in public sector that works to connect public sector challenges and then mainly teams in the private sector that have innovative ideas or solutions, and help them work together to co-create the solutions that work for everyone. So we've been working on this for a year or so now, and even when creating the GovTech Lab, we kind of worked first on prototyping and experimenting if this team would even be needed in the public sector, and now we help public sector institutions to find those kind of areas where they can experiment, where they can work together with different teams to build different solutions and kind of then move on to actually scaling them. So we're not like focusing on major digital transformations now or for now, but we hope to bring that kind of a spirit of experimentation and prototyping into different aspects of public sector.
Thank you very much, Arune. And that's, I think, a very, very nice segue to our conversation today. And this sort of, I definitely see some some common threads in the topics. So what we want to do before we move on to the conversation around a set of themes is actually just to get us started with some imagery. It's always nice to get a little bit concrete to stimulate our imagination. So we have 3 different images that we'll run on the screen. I'll start with the first one and say a little bit about how that image, what it says about digital government. So if I can ask for our helpers to put it up. And here we go. So this is a screenshot from Aula. And Aula is a newly implemented digital service in Denmark. It is basically the platform for connecting teachers and students and parents when it comes to school, primary school from grades 0 to 10. So you can imagine, actually, even though Denmark is a small country of 6 million, it is literally millions of people who are going on this one, including 500,000 young people and children. And on the one side, Aula is a great example of public digitization, because Aula is available on your smartphone or as an app. And so that's, of course, one key piece of digital government today. It has to be mobile. And so mobility is there, and you can bring it out anywhere you are, and it's sort of in your pocket, whether you're a teacher or you're a student or you are a parent. The other aspect of this app is that it's quite secure. It builds on a common ID for which all Danes use and have, and it's in that way connected to the same digital identifier that we use when we log on to other public services, when we receive messages from government digitally, or when we even go on to our financial services, to our bank, our insurance company, and so on. So it's basically built on the back of this great infrastructure that enables everyone, every citizen, to connect to government. In that way, it's universal. It's also the same we all use, so there's no confusion as to which app to engage with, or depending on what school you go to. And I have 3 kids, so I can see each kid in the app and follow them there. So that's in many ways great. What's not so great is that we've still built something that is very clunky when it comes to the user experience. And if you ask parents what they think about Aula, they will get very upset. Because it's not a great interface. It's not intuitive, and just getting a document, let's say a schedule for the week for your child, is like a 7-step process, and it's actually quite frustrating. And this might get improved over time, but it was certainly in many ways not built to be really well designed and intuitive and simple and accessible. The other aspect, which I would say is a bit critical, is that this app was developed by a company, I won't mention the name, but it's a company that probably builds between a third and half of all government digital services today. So we have almost an oligopoly in the marketplace for services from the private sector to government. And that's not necessarily, I mean, it's great for the company, they're very successful, but it's not necessarily a success for innovation. So this app could have been an opportunity for startups or SMEs, small companies, to get into this space. It could perhaps also have been so there actually was choice for parents on which app to use. It could have been a possibility to build something that was such a great product that it could be exported to other countries and become a bit of a jobs and growth adventure. But that is not the case. So perhaps there's also a bit of a missed opportunity here to open up a market space and opportunities for more innovation and change from the private sector, which may goes a bit to the GovTech Lab in Lithuania and the emphasis they have. So to conclude, the image of Aula is both in some ways a powerful one on the potential of digital government, but it also has a couple of warning lessons, I think, in it as well. We're going to move over to Arune to see the next image, and I'll ask you to tell us about why you chose the image and what that's about.
Yeah, well, when I was thinking about the digital government and digital transformation, and as the topic goes, it's focused on people. But I chose this image not because it's related anything with Zoom or working online, but because this is the photos from our Hack the Crisis hackathons. And this is people from private sector, from public sector, from startups, academia, all around different sectors. And what we saw during the crisis was that, especially in the cases when the government needed tax solutions, it was quite naturally it turned to startups and innovators to kind of come up with them. So it didn't even think of, now we need to like start building solutions by ourselves and so on, because that kind of required very quick out of the box ideas on how you solve those emerging challenges related to pandemic. So for me, that it kind of showed the potential that in certain situations, like the both public sector understands the value of turning to that wider and more diverse kind of players in the field, and also from the private sector, because it really showed that a lot of startups and innovators want to create products that have that social impact. Um, so that was kind of that, and I think that's the idea that should go behind every digital transformation project. But talking also then about, as Kristen was saying, and more, what's not so great about this is that, we build a lot of very interesting solutions. Some of them turned out to now like new companies, new startups, but still like bureaucracy like caught up with a lot of different decisions and different ideas, and it has been still difficult to procure them, to build them, to scale them. So I think the crisis overall showed that potential of working together with different players and actually like productively working, not just as a checklist that you need to do in terms to pass some legislation. But it also showed that, we still need to kind of fix that ground, and like even if you have the greatest ideas, there's still like all the bureaucracy and legislation has to catch up with the ideas of the like 21st century, and the ideas that people have, and that the ideas that need to be built and developed to solve that challenges that are probably going to be coming up more often and often. So that's for me, that's kind of being both the the people, and the people from different fields are the core of digital transformation, that we kind of need to catch up just with all that potential that we have, both in Lithuania, Estonia, and Denmark, and in any other country.
Thank you so much. And I think I can just imagine how you have this great digital hackathon and all those ideas and the startups and everybody's happy and, also potential. Then all of that great work ends up in a little cubicle office in the corner of a bureaucratic administration and government. And it takes its way to the parliament and so on. And then suddenly it's all gone. And the result is at least not as promising as that. So I think that's some of the tension we'll be exploring in our conversation between the creative processes and then the scaling or the building it into systems that are at scale. So Siim, what have you got for us in terms of imagery?
Yes. Mine was a very optimistic one, in a sense. I think there's sort of four connotations to why I chose this picture out of the stack of pictures we usually use to describe sort of how does digital life look in Estonia, or e-Estonia as we mockingly call it, or lovingly call it. There are four reasons. I think, first of all, when we speak about digital transformation, then I still want to go back to the value point that Kristen so nicely put us on. So the way we have been thinking about it in Estonia is that ultimately our job is to make people's lives easier. So and in that sense, digital tools, services, everything in the back end office or back office of government, can be a vehicle for that. So making life easy is the ultimate goal in some ways. But there's one very specific relation. That's my second point. What we have said more clearly is that we want to make life easy by saving you time as well. Because ultimately, what's the biggest and most valuable resource these days? In many ways, it's time we don't have. So, if we can make lives easier for you, you don't have to queue up in offices or, wait for some application deadline to come. You get notifications and stuff like that. So basically, we save you time that you can, either be more productive, work more if you like to, or just chill with your children, on a grass reading a book, whatever. The third thing why I brought this is that ultimately, what's the biggest way how to make life easy for you is that, you know, things happen in the background for you proactively and seamlessly. So these are a bit of buzzwords, perhaps, but we really mean it here. So at least in Estonia, again, the best government is that doesn't sort of interfere unless necessarily, you know, it has to, or government would have to come across unless you necessarily have to. So, you know, that's how we're designing and redesigning many of the services now to say that, look, let's have machines take care of it. You don't have to bother. So if a child is born, why do we wait for you to come and, you know, apply to name the baby? We can send you proactively an email instead and congratulate you for the new baby and ask you for the name, and then you give it at the time you choose to. So just turning it around and basically, yeah, making stuff happen more invisibly in the background, that should be the goal. So that, again, you can even relax if you like to. And the fourth point is a transformation to make it all happen. I think Arune hinted to this already, and Kristen yourself too. It's about it's not about just somehow digitizing or digitization or digitalization, whatever the term is. It's actually about rethinking how we work and organize our things and processes and actions, right, in the government at least. So to make stuff truly seamless, it's not about that I somehow put an application online. So to highlight this as an experience, one of the very earliest experiences we had was building up an online tax office so that tax declaring could be as seamless as possible. That's, you know, 20 years back now we started with this. And, you know, we could have just taken the paper form and put it up online, and it would have been a sort of online service, but it would just be as much of a hassle as it was before on paper, except that you don't have to show up to an office to, you know, present it. Instead, the tax office guys were very smart to say, but hey, we have most of those bits of data already. Why don't we bring this and present this to you for preview? And, you know, you don't have to spend time on submitting the same data again that government already has. And thereby, let's just make it easier for you to declare taxes. That sort of redesign of the process and the thinking and stuff behind, that's what made it so simple that now these days you have, you know, 96% of the taxes are declared online. Most of them take less than 30 seconds to be done. And even that we could basically automate. So my point being that again, the transformation was in the whole process and stuff. It's not about, yeah, somehow just doing the same thing that we used to do. Just now let's do it over the internet.
That's excellent, and actually, I think it's a good segue to our topic for conversation, which we have about a quarter of an hour for. And it strikes me from both of your contributions, Siim and Arune, that there's a question of what does transformation actually mean, which may connect even to the question of what's the vision for digital government. What should it actually do? And in many ways, what you just shared with us, Siim, could sound like a vision for digital government. But I'm kind of wondering, to what extent is that an explicit one, or is it more implicit as you've learned along the way? Is this something that's embedded into international strategy or policy, that this is actually what you're pursuing as a vision? I'd like to start with you, Siim, and then go to Arune. So if you just can maybe elaborate really on this point.
Yeah, so I wish it was as implicit that everyone would basically share it the same way in all the agencies and so forth. I think it's a, you know, it's a very long conversation, but there's a myriad of factors that have to come to play to make this sort of goals and directions and visions a daily reality of thinking and acting, right? It comes down to digital competencies and the sort of, you know, even managerial competencies in those agencies. Can they run those transformations? I mean, can they organize themselves to do digital in this right proper way? But if I somehow make the answer shorter, I would say this way. So scaling is always a challenge, right? Scaling through the government because of, you know, again, competences differ. How to say, the duties of agencies differ a bit. So for everybody thinks that they're special. So scaling is a trick part. But for us, it has become and been an explicit strategy horizontally to then try to push through the government at least. So I hope this answers you a bit to say that it's been voiced out as a direction of travel, and we are always adding the next layers to this. So for example, today, if we are making a new Estonian digital government strategy, then we are taking this to the next level because again, the details will be different, but the vision is the same. So for example, in the next future, how do we have a seamless government or the best experience with the government? obviously we want to make the most use of artificial intelligence in the form of virtual assistants. For us, clearly having a seamless government will be about that you'll talk to Siri or Google Assistant, or for that matter, even a government provided virtual assistant. And through that, everything else happens for you. It's voice-based, it's proactive, it comes to you through notifications, as opposed to you finding an app or a website or whatever like that. But fundamentally, we're still talking about the same thing. Stuff happens as seamlessly and visibly proactive in the background for you to make your life easier and make you spare time.
Shift to Arune and hear from your side when it comes to your daily work and how that connects to maybe overall policy or strategy for Lithuania. What are the principles or directions that you're looking at?
I think the overall vision is quite similar to what Siim was saying about that seamless kind of proactive government. Although the vision has been mostly more kind of implicit, while the strategy that's been also focused on kind of the same pillars around making public services more accessible, like digitalizing it, opening the data. That has been more of a focus. But maybe not the vision as much as maybe we would want. What I also seen throughout kind of the daily work is that gap between the vision and the actual reality as well. So how do you kind of maintain that like vision and desire for actual innovation and for that solutions and technological opportunities are out there with the capabilities, as you mentioned before, of the people in the government and of people, of the challenges that they have. And that's been kind of what we've seen throughout our work as well. While for some institutions that we work with, for example, worked with the Bank of Lithuania, where they wanted to like recreate all the process of reporting for financial institutions that match kind of, that match that intuitive actions and the user experience. While for others, like very basic steps are still where they focus on. And I think it's important in terms of like kind of moving forward in digital transformation, like find both. Like you don't want to bring other like those innovators down in terms of say telling them please slow down because everyone is a bit slower, but also you kind of want to balance that of bringing everyone up, but also letting those like the most innovative institutions or people to actually lead the way and like show example of what's been done. So what we've been trying to do is kind of find those leaders and empower them, but also then kind of standardize those tools that they have or like the knowledge that they have and try to break that to other public sector institutions. So that's has been how we try to match that like vision and like overall strategies with day-to-day implementation of what I think is usually way difficult than having the big ideas, but actually how you implement it day to day.
And I actually want to connect a little bit with that because your focus has been on this question of bringing in the creativity, the innovation, and the expertise of the private sector more as partners. And of course, the question is both in terms of the ideas, but also implementation. And I'm just wondering, also from your side, Siim, you haven't mentioned so much about it yet, but how do you, in your context, connect between what's run by government and maybe also built by government on the one side, and how do you connect on the other side with the private sector? What's your model or what's your take on that?
For a long time, our main approach was this, that on the government, then we have to be a smart buyer, so-called, meaning that we rarely have built things in-house, but always sort of went to the market to find the best partners to build it with. But it still meant that it was very much sort of government-driven in a sense that us figuring out what we want to do digitally, and then sort of envisioning that together, and then sort of buying it in, and then actually taking over again the running of it. So it was still very much like a bit of classical vendor relationship model with a few caveats. But we always been very open. I mean, again, Estonia is a small place, so we've always been very conscious that we have to be very open, at least in terms of dialogue, in terms of getting ideas on board, and then perhaps having governments being convinced and then going out and tendering the work in for the next good idea. But for the last 3 years, we've been trying to change that. So I very much myself believe in a sort of open innovation concept and practice, meaning that we have to open ourselves up for not just ideas from everyone and others or co-creation with the user for that matter, but also that we don't have to build stuff ourselves that much. So we've been sort of doing different sort of tweaks in the sort of procurement process and stuff like that to make that more possible. One of the best things I think we have come up with is a bit of, for the lack of a better word, a bit of like a playground or a sandbox approach, where we have this legal framework where we say that, look, if you actually have something as a startup, as even a foreign company, whoever you are, a developer on yourself, if you have something that would be a good addition to our government technological stack or even as a service, then basically we're happy for you to come and try it out with us and for our users, right? And in that sense, we don't really necessarily pay you for the time being, but at least you get like a reference client. So it's exactly this sort of sandbox or playground idea that we go develop a bit jointly, and then you might have a product that you take to the market or markets elsewhere. So that's one just example of trying to find different ways how to encourage others to come and work with us, and we don't have to do the whole thing ourselves, because we will also never be able to do it all, or even be the smartest guys in the room. So we have to open ourselves for others to flourish.
Just to follow up on that one, because does that mean that when it comes to the government's, you could say, a vision or strategy for digital transformation, that there's actually a growth component in it to stimulate innovation in the private sector, or give opportunity for private firms, national or international, to access government challenges, government resources, government data, perhaps? I mean, it sounds as if the explicit objective, which was clear, that actually beyond providing a great service and seamlessness and outcomes to citizens, there's also this potential of unleashing innovation and private sector growth. Is that an explicit goal?
Absolutely, as a side goal or as a spillover for that matter. So, and it also do more things to that. It's always been there. So even in the vendor relationships of the past, it was exactly the idea that one of the reasons, let's say 2 reasons why we never started building in-house. But first of all, especially back in the day, it was very hard to compete on pay. So, finding money to buy work in as opposed to hiring somebody in your staff was easier. And second reason was also there was always a hope that this way, then technology sector gains competence to take to other sectors, export to other countries, whatever. And this has happened. We have a vibrant tech sector and scene now, and not only because of government, but as partially because of government procurement. So it's been always there, and now it just is shifting in form. And my last bit about it also might have to do a little bit that government CI office, our team, we are part of Ministry of Economic Affairs. So it's also a bit of in our psyche to always look out for the industry and the market and the growth part as well.
Yeah, that's interesting that you place there, because in many countries you would find this unit or this team in the Ministry of Finance, for example, or in even the State Ministry or Cabinet. So over to you, Arune, because this is what you're doing, right? I mean, as a GovTech Lab, you explicitly are created to involve the private sector, and so this must also be both a strategic effort for the government, and must be your daily way of working, or what?
Yeah, that's been one of the kind of key arguments as well on why we need the GovTech Lab, and what we used as an argument to set it up, and to kind of promise to the public sector officials, that this is the way to increase our tech sector, increase the number of startups. So that's definitely been always the key. Of course, always having the other side of the goal in mind, which is innovating public sector. So I think for us, that's definitely being one of the focus, especially when you consider, like, I think in Lithuania, public procurement consists for around 15% of GDP. So, I mean, it would be a waste of money and of the potential if you don't even try to use it for kind of, creating and like forming and encouraging that innovation in the market if you're such an important player in the market. So what we try to do is but we try to do and come up with processes that are both outside public procurement frameworks to encourage that very early experimentation, but also as Sim was saying, try to find the ways also within the regulation or tweak the regulation of how we can actually pay startups that are experimenting and creating prototypes, how we can start paying them from the very beginning, because we want to be kind of work on equal terms, and we don't want to if we want to increase that diversity in the market, we need to give tools to those smaller companies. And I mean, obviously money is one of the tools, right? So I mean, we still struggle with convincing a lot of institutions to put money forward at the very early stage of innovation. But that's kind of getting easier and easier. So we see a lot of potential into involving the smaller teams, innovative teams, but also giving them tools at the same time. So we cannot expect have the same structure and the same regulation and everything, and then that for some reason something will change, right? We need to change a bit that kind of baseline to change the situation. So that's what we're trying to do as well. And yeah, the private sector, the startups, are one of the key focus of our work.
So I want to shift our conversation slightly, even though we already got started on it, to this question of barriers or challenges in these shifts, right? And even though digital government is no longer new, things are changing, and there are ambitions, as you also mentioned, to find maybe more open, more engaging, and also more private sector involving ways of digitizing. So my question to you both, I don't know who wants to go first, but what are the main challenges or barriers that you see in your daily work as you move forward on these ambitions? Where is it that it's hardest and most difficult to do things the way you want to do them?
I can start quickly with a relation back to the photo that I had. That I think before the COVID crisis, I would have said that people and their skill set and their motivation is kind of both the main driver, but can also be kind of the biggest challenge in terms of bringing those innovative ideas. But I think at least in Lithuania, what the COVID crisis showed that, I mean, even when you have those, there's still you cannot forget all the regulation stuff and all the infrastructure and everything, which kind of, I mean, when you really are passionate and you want to innovate in certain area, you can forget those things and think that they will just come kind of naturally. And of course, if we have great idea, we'll be able to develop and implement it. But these things catch up. So I'd say now both regulation that allows that kind of innovation and allows having new kind of products, but also the people that have skill set and they feel empowered to kind of to experiment, and they trust the process of the innovation and of finding innovative solutions, so they don't have to question themselves, am I doing something wrong? Is it according to the public procurement regulations? Is someone's gonna punish me for doing that? So I think trust, feeling trust in themselves and in the process of that innovation hunt, is definitely one of the key things if we want people to encourage people across the government to look for those opportunities of digital transformation.
Saying that this appetite for experimentation or recognition that is needed, and maybe the trust in those kinds of processes has grown during the crisis, because there's a concrete experience that's been necessary, and so would you say the capability in the system is higher now than before?
Yeah, I think it definitely, that desire and that kind of, when they saw some institutions that managed to kind of find innovative solutions, that's definitely been kind of increased. And for people, maybe a lot of people actually saw that we do need that, right? It's not an add-in or an kind of nice to have thing, but if we want to solve difficult challenges, we need to both kind of co-create together with others, but look for out-of-the-box solutions. But I think for others, this might actually discourage them, because they saw that okay, I went through all this process, I really find very good solutions, but then I can still cannot buy them, or I cannot incorporate that in my work. Right. So I think there's been kind of a lot of shift up, but then some of the people have been kind of probably brought down a bit by the reality of the bureaucracy.
True. So on your side, Siim, when it comes to, I mean, you again, Estonia has been widely recognized as a leader in digital government for now quite some time, and that of course, no pressure, but that's you always wonder what's next, and what will be what will the front runner do this time. So when you look to the next stages of your strategy and your efforts, what are the barriers or challenges that you are expecting to see, or that you're already now dealing with?
I think, well, it's the same stuff as elsewhere. I mean, anywhere in the world. A lot of it comes down to, a lot of the barriers, the obstacles comes down to, the nuts and bolts and ABC of change management, right? We're talking about here, fundamentally digital transformation. What we're talking about like how to manage some sort of change in how we work, in how we are set up as a government and so forth. So, that's like classical stuff you can even read from the book and implement, right? But more concretely answering you, I think always is a challenge of attitudes and attitudes. What I'm mostly concerned with in Estonia as well is just the question of speed. So especially because in Estonia, like you said, I mean, we have had some progress when it comes to digital government. We've been on this path for a long time. Complacency is easy to come in, right? And or just the tiredness of constant change. But that's a tiredness we cannot afford. First of all, because we are nowhere near ready, and secondly, like constant change is sort of the sign of our times, isn't it? So fighting this attitude and sort of complacency is necessarily a big part. And again, I'm generalizing a bit, but because we have clearly agencies and people and folks are amazing, the front runners, and keep doing innovative stuff for our government and the world. But just overall, we need to lift all the boats, and I think that's a lot of the job of outfits like government CIO offices to make sure that everybody progresses, because you people expect user experience to be even across the government. And I think there are two specific attitudes that are sort of blocking sort of progress in any government, including ours sometimes. Well, first of all, there's still, to my amazement, so much attitude about not invented here, the sort of that famous syndrome, that basically, we want to reinvent the wheels, or somebody wants to reinvent the wheels. I mean, if it works in other government, let's just bluntly copy this. We have been doing it in Estonia. We took the national identity concept from Finland back in the day. We have borrowed quite a bit of process ideas from, how digitization happens in Denmark and so forth. If it works elsewhere, why not just use it? Countries and agencies are not that special from each other, I would argue. Secondly, is the issue of making things a bit too complex. And there's a lot of talk we can have about sort of, bureaucratic sort of, risk aversion and stuff like that. But fundamentally, the whole spirit of experimentation, let's try stuff out. This has to be there for speed to be there and sort of innovation, the next things to happen. So if I sum this up, because you kindly hinted that there's always a question of what we're up to next. I mean, in Estonia, what I'm mostly concerned with is how to build the sort of systematic readiness to be ready for whatever is the next thing. Basically, but that constantly new ideas, things would come up with, people would test them, experiment with them, scale them, and not just be keen on one next big thing only.
So I like that notion of systematic readiness. I've been looking into the concept of anti-fragility recently. So the idea from the author Nicholas Nassim Taleb the one who also wrote The Black Swan. But the idea of anti-fragility, meaning that an organization or a thing gets stronger from pressure, or stronger and better from being exposed to challenges. And in a sense, you can say this as systematic readiness about being prepared and able to deal with whatever comes or whatever challenge is interesting. I think in terms of building organizations, right? And I'm wondering whether I'll get back to Arune as well on this one, but basically, what are the elements you want to build in, Siim, when it comes to systematic readiness? What are the components or elements you're looking for in in your structure and your organization, maybe inside, maybe also outside government?
These are a bit of the things I've been already talking about, hinting, or you have brought up yourself in this conversation as well. I mean, it's the whole sort of way of doing things, isn't it? I mean, the sort of fast and agile way in terms of user-centric design and the best practices of that, all through experimentation to scaling. There's a lot of, I think, sort of, good book or good set of practices out there that actually do work, and that's part of it. But the second part, I would say, is that what a lot I'm fixated with from my end is also how do we have the governmental funding and financing mechanisms that support this approach? How do we have the procurement and the legal sort of adjustment mechanisms for that? So it's easy to talk in theory. I mean, we are thinking and testing a few things out in this range, but we don't have even all the answers yet.
And how about competencies? I'm wondering what kind of skills, what kind of staffing, internally or outside, is that something you're also looking into?
Absolutely, and this is something that I hinted already before, saying that I think the sort of uneven level of competences is the biggest hindrance on a practical level. And competences, we have tried to define, let's say, what sort of knowledge should every manager in public sector, for example, have, or every specialist in public sector have. And we are not talking about here that they should know how to code, but at least sort of behaviors that they should be able to see through, like thinking about the user, like design, like knowing basic information security, like knowing basic data literacy. I mean, stuff like that at least. So we're now, from this defining these competences, we are now trying to start quite a bit of work from top executives to like specialist level in terms of raising those competencies and skills. So we are coming up with a few sort of, even training programs, online courses, stuff like that to push that forward. We are not, let's say, innovative in that sense. There's quite a few governments who've done quite a bit of work on this in UK, in Canada, and elsewhere. But yeah, we have to do the same.
So let's shifting to Lithuania, to you, Arune, for last comment on this topic. What is your take on this in terms of building capability, readiness, ability, and other investments or processes needed that you see in front of you and in your context?
Yeah, I very much agree what was said before, because what we've been trying to do as well, to not like teach people how to code in the government, but teach them about different technologies and the potential of those technologies to solve different challenges, so that they not necessarily know how to solve it, but they know where to look at, or that they know that these kind of solutions exist, they could be implemented. So that's been our focus internally. But what was also like over the last year, they've been building this digital Lithini Academy, where also we kind of decide on the main competencies of what the public sector official should have, and try to kind of mix the unstructured approach where you try to just encourage people to join you and learn with you, but now we're trying to figure out as well how to make it a bit more formal. So you can move to certain scale when you just have people that are already motivated and want to join you for the workshops and from for other learning activities. But now I think the challenge is, like, we have that kind of base of people and we know how to work with them, but how we make it more structured and ensure that everyone has that training. So we've been working on that a bit. We have I mean, there's been actually a lot of investment into that over like and during the COVID, with the new kind of economic recovery plans, both for like GovTech and piloting GovTech solutions, but also in building that digital kind of skill set. And as it was mentioned, not necessarily in terms of like coding, but in terms of understanding the potential across the public sector. So I'm not sure, what's how it's gonna turn out, but I mean, at least the effort is here. So I think, I mean, I encourage, and we as a team encourage experimentation. So we kind of are happy to see that at least there's some kind of the starting points in terms of trying to make it like more scalable and more kind of geared towards a wide spectrum of public sector officials.
So our time is nearly up, but I wanted to end with a question looking a little bit beyond your current practices. As you both mentioned along the way, this journey of digitizing government and engaging citizens and users in the process has been going on for quite a while. And even though there is a sense of not invented here, there's also been inspirations from other places and countries that you've drawn in on. Looking forward to the future and the next phases of the journey, where do you look for inspiration, or where are the examples that you like to see more of in your own country? And this could be both government and could also be private sector. But I'm just wondering, and maybe you can share that with our followers here, where to go, where to look, or be aware something interesting is happening. So I'm just wondering if you could just give an example or two of where you're looking for the next inspiration. Don't know if you want to go first, Siim, if you got one.
Yeah, sure. Look, so if we talk in terms of geographies and other governments, then we've been consciously trying to keep a finger on the pulse and be friendly with other governments that are doing sort of amazing work in digital space. And exactly for the same reasons, to have inspiration, but also why not collaborate and share some stuff all the way to some sharing some code, perhaps. Our sort of biggest range of sort of partners in that sense is a group called Digital Nations that Denmark's also just recently become a part of, and these are some of the 10 governments around the world now who've been sort of constantly on the path of building some of the very best government services. So this is one range. But my other point of answering you is that we constantly try to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sort of startup world, and especially as we do have a very vibrant one in Estonia here now. And even if we can't use the same necessarily product or service that they provide, at least sort of borrowing the ideas and the ways of doing things and adding something, why not, to the stack or in the back end. So it's I would say having the sensors out and scanning the horizon is more and more important, because if we can piggyback on something, then the faster we can go.
And it can really be anywhere, as you say, both government and the private sector, and including startups. And of course, Arune, that's part of your job, I suppose, or job description, I assume. But still, where you're looking, or other examples you can mention that you think are inspiring and you want to draw on.
Yeah, well, like to begin with, when we were starting the GovTech Lab, like looking for different cases in like Scotland and in Poland and UK has been like where we drew the inspiration from and why we even started the GovTech Lab. So from the international perspective, we actually recently formed this CivTech Alliance where we work with teams from Scotland, as I mentioned, UK. There's also a team from Accelerate Estonia, where we kind of share the ideas of how we work with different stakeholders and what kind of challenges we could solve together. And this kind of very international, there are people from Australia and Barbados. This kind of network of teams in public sector that are focused on this bringing CivTech and GovTech to more prominent stage has definitely been an inspiration to us and also a push to work harder. And internally, I see that in Lithuania, there's now, I think, more and more change in terms of increasing the quality of like consultations with the citizens, and now increasingly more not just a check in the process, but trying to figure out different ways and testing them. And there was a conference recently, a few weeks ago, where loads of people, public sector officials, tuned in to learn about the different experience, how you can effectively consult with citizens and businesses. So what I like, for me, that's kind of very hopeful like move as well, seeing that kind of bringing from the quantity now to very like to bigger quality in terms of actually and purposefully consulting and working together with the citizens. So that's a very nice change.
Thank you very much. I think in conclusion, this is a kind of an optimistic note to end on, this question that we started with of how do we actually improve people's lives through digital government, and what are the approaches, tools, mindsets, and attitudes, not least, that are needed. And we've heard from two highly creative bureaucrats who shared their experience. I want to just really thank you, Siim and Arune, for sharing with us, and of course, Creative Bureaucracy Festival for the opportunity to share this conversation with our audience. So for me, from Copenhagen, thank you very much for the dialogue, and I very much look forward to continuing the conversation and following your respective journeys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.